Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Last Best Hope for Conversation, your Babylon 5 podcast. I am following the chain of command. I am Jesse Jackson. Joining me is Lou.
Hello, everyone. I feel vindicated. Vindicated, I tell you.
Karen.
Hi there. Loving Takar even more after this week.
Yeah, and we are talking episode.
Definitely.
Point of episode originally aired February 26, 1996. And I'm going to start out with, can't this show get decent guest stars? I mean, what's the deal? Why can't they do anything a little bit more?
Yeah, for sure.
I had teased you guys last time that there was a significant guest star. Did you guys know? Had you looked at did you see that with the credits? Or
Nope. Totally a surprise. I was very happily surprised.
Yeah. Same here. But the weird thing is, physically, when I saw her, I said, she looks familiar. But as soon as she started talking, I go, oh my God, it's the voice of the Enterprise.
Computer.
It's the computer. Yeah. And that's how even the rest of the episode, even though she was acting and emoting, I just kept on going. I'm listening to the computer from the Enterprise.
I think of her as
she's got so ingrained because of especially because of TNG. Yeah,
I think of her as Troy's mom.
Yeah.
I never liked that character.
And see, by the way, as we get into that, one of the things that because people are just no damn good, gave Stravinsky thing like you brought in the worst character of Babylon of Star Trek's history, and he said, and when we brought in Water King, they're like, God, Chekhov in Babylon 5, and he quickly became one of our most popular / hated characters. So these actors are typecast for a reason, and and he wanted to give them a different chance.
It's too bad Walter Koenig wasn't in this episode too.
boy, talk about just all happiness.
Yeah.
So, Lou, give me quick thoughts of the episode.
It was scarily prescient, and I know we're going to get into it later on because your initial fan reaction to this episode is it's quite different than I think what people would have today. But man, it felt so weird to hear all this stuff about sedition and martial law and the military incursions and so forth. And it just was very prescient. And at the same time, I know I think everybody suspected that something bad was going to come from the Nightwatch, but I just felt a little bit extra vindicated that I hated that whole storyline, but I knew what the purpose of it was, and it paid off in this episode.
And I do want to bring up, and you mentioned this, one of the things you kept talking about is chain of command, right? This doesn't make any sense. Why is this involved? And I held my tongue when you were discussing that because I didn't want to spoil one of the really nice reveals of showing how badass Sheridan is, not only as an action hero, but as in thinking outside the box. Yeah. Karen.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this episode. It was not a hardship for me to rewatch it. I love that Majel Barrett's on it, for one thing. Also, Louis Arquette, who played General Smits, one of the generals that he talks to, father of all the Arquettes, as it were. But he's been in a lot of stuff like Waiting for Guffman and a bunch of other things. He has sadly, again, passed on every other actor from this show, apparently. But it was really cool to see how awesome the guest stars were, but it wasn't like guest star right in our face. And while I liked that part of it, that the quality of the performances were good, I thought the story also, it almost didn't need good guest stars to carry it. I thought it was super solid and a really great, I would say it's most likely a turning point in this season. So again, I don't know. I'm putting my hands up. I don't know, but it sure seems like it to me that Sheridan is defying this order, and it looks like a fulcrum to me.
Mm-hmm. Definitely the most on point episode title of the series so far.
Agreed.
Yes, it is. And this might be the title of the third season. He gives a overall title for the season, and this may be it. I'll have to look that up.
It is. Babylon.
Yeah.
Oh, wait a minute. Season 3, Point of No Return. Yep.
Yeah. Yes, it is very significant. I love this episode. I watched it multiple times. Just loved everything about it. I don't know if there's a weak moment in the episode. Gosh, where to start? So let's start with everything's gone to hell in a handbasket. There is now, because of martial law, they are specifically saying that Nightwatch is now in control. We've got military people that are trying to protect the Senate and protect the Constitution by fighting against this unlawful thing. And Babylon 5 is waiting for it to go to reach them. They all know this is going to happen. By the way, a couple of things that I pulled out the JMS script book.
Are you holding it yet?
No, I'm not holding it, but I will hold it. Here you go. Here is the script
awesome
book. Yeah. He said that he had gotten the Joint Chiefs of Staff of the U.S. reached out to him, and they said, hey, there's a call for the Joint Chiefs of Staff. The Pentagon, they want to talk to you. And he's like, why does the Pentagon want to talk to me? So he gets on the phone, and this guy says, hey, huge fans of Babylon 5 here in the military. Is there any way we can get synopsis of the episodes to us? Why? Because people who are serving in submarines, they can't watch the show. So if they could get synopsis of what's happening, that would keep them going till they could get in and see it. So he made that happen. Then he told the story that a few weeks later, the Secret Service is wanting to talk to you. And he said, okay. And so he talked to someone. He goes, we want to tell you we're big fans here, but I believe that you have gotten information that is declassified of how top secret documents look, but it's out of date. So we just released some things that's no longer classified. Would you like us to send you this data so that it would look exactly what modern is? Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course. He says, is there anything else we can do for you? He says, do you want to throw in a Secret Service t-shirt? He goes, we might be able to do that. So sure enough, he gets a package. And so the reason I'm bringing this up is when Sheridan is holding that document, that is exactly what it would look like, except with the Earth Alliance logo instead of the United States. No. And they gave him a polo that says the White House. And JMS is talking to the guy and says, hey, I really appreciate it. Everything's great. He says, but your polo doesn't say the Secret Service. And he says, we're the Secret Service. Wouldn't that defeat the point if we said that on the shirt? And Joe said, yeah, sometimes I'm not very smart.
Or he's too smart.
Yeah, I thought that was really well done. So I'm going to start with you, Lou, because you have been concerned about Nightwatch. The general, as Karen already talked about, does a great job of saying, look, look at this as an opportunity, not a problem. He gives this whole speech about you got to follow the chain of command. Yours is not to question why, but to do or die, basically. And I also want to talk about John's meeting with the command staff and how we're just going to hang in there. And Carmen's like, what happened? So let's talk about any of that you want to, and we'll just we'll go to where we feel like we need to go to the next topic. And we'll start with you, Lou.
Okay. With regards to the general, I wasn't sure of his allegiance because we've never met this guy. Initially, when that scene played out, I wasn't catching the subtext of what he was trying to say until Sheridan went through the process of figuring out if there was a hidden meaning in that message. So that was a nice twist in the episode that I didn't catch until Sheridan started to parse out that message again. And it's cool that his little wrist communicator thing is like a VCR control.
Beep, beep,
that's
yes,
the ultimate remote on the back of my hand. I'd like to have one of those at home because you got like 3 or 4 or 5, 6 remotes, and you always have to go. He's got the one for the thing, so that was good. And yeah, I thought the whole arc played out well. I was hoping that they would have gotten one of the previous guest stars of the generals that have played a general to come back on for that particular scene. And nothing against the actor that played it, but it was just for continuity and clarity of who's who in the chain of command. And yeah, it's just it's just on point for what's just been happening in the last couple of years, especially in the States with what happened with January 6th and so forth. So it's a few people holding the line on the rule of law that prevents something catastrophic from happening. And of course, in the case of the show, this decision is going to have more of a impact or a long-term immediate effect as opposed to what happened in real life, because he's at loggerheads with the government at least at the conclusion of this episode. What's going to happen next can only be an escalation of what's going on from this episode. So I'm definitely interested to see how that plays out.
Yeah, could I just say we need a Zach?
Yeah.
Right now. I think if we had someone like that could pull in all the idiots and make them an ultimatum at that point, I think that would be great. I wasn't surprised at all by that turn. It wasn't a spoiler or anything like that. We all knew that Zach was on the side of good, right? So I really loved that point in the show as well, when he opens up the door and they're all just standing there in his quarters. I thought that was great. And it also, I liked that it hit on different points with Zach and Garibaldi just in this one episode. He and Garibaldi get in a fight. Zach tries to calm him down. Then he's there when Garibaldi comes into the room when they're having that meeting. And then Garibaldi's in his quarters, and that's the whole Zach finally comes out and says, "Hey, dude." And I'm assuming because it's off screen.
Yeah.
I've always been on your side, but I wanted to be in. I wanted to be in there. And I don't think that was his goal all along, but I think once he realized that Nightwatch was the bad guys, he decided he was going to stick it out so that he could at least get information on them. So I love that part as well.
Yeah. One of the quotes was, Zach says, "They're all yours, Captain," as he takes off his patch. And John says, "Thanks, Zach." And Garibaldi says, "You did the right thing." And I love Zach's line, "Everyone keeps saying that. I'm not sure who means it, but this time, yeah, I think I did."
Yeah.
I think Jeff Conway has done a wonderful job on this. We know him from the dumb wannabe actor from Taxi.
Yeah.
And he in Grease. And he's the perfect guy that I just want the extra $50 paycheck. Yep. And then, well, okay, we'll get along. And just slowly but surely, he realizes he's sinking into something he's not comfortable with. And then I love the idea of, okay, it's time for you to decide. Are you going to poop or get off the pot, as they say down south? And he made the right decision. And I loved his arc. I loved how well he played it. And just really, because of us liking him so much, I think it helps stress how Nightwatch, we should have suspected all along, but evil is always in a pretty face. Yeah. Any other thoughts on Zach before we move?
He's not done, right?
Oh, okay. He continues. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah. No, spoilers, he's here all the way to the end.
Okay, that's no big spoiler.
Unless he dies. And then, but no, yeah.
Yeah. I guess I'm not quite as enamored with that character as you two are. I found his gosh darn, oh shucks kind of mode of acting gets a little grating for me over time.
Okay.
But and the other thing is, I didn't get the feeling that he was ambivalent. But he was ambivalent, but he still was. I didn't think his loyalties were torn as deep as projected in the show. And maybe I think the show was cheating a little bit in holding their cards close to the vest on exactly where Zach's loyalties lay, to build up the tension that what's going to happen in that scene where they corral all the Nightwatch into the airlock, cargo bay or whatever it was. I thought that was a little bit of a cheat, and also it was unnecessary because I think it was obvious to anybody watching the episode that he was going to do the right thing. So it didn't play out that great for me. It wasn't bad. I just thought it was a bit weak. And I just think it's because of the way that character's been portrayed over the whole Nightwatch arc, that he's been ambivalent the whole way through. But it was frustrating that he never, especially like in the earlier parts of this episode, never came out and stood with Garibaldi. And I think that was probably, I don't know how Garibaldi's going to take it all, that maybe the point of that scene when he went there to try to convince the security team to follow him, that none of them did, that either those people are just scared, and in those kinds of situations, when you're scared, you don't make good decisions. But it was pretty disappointing, and I'm sure it was very hurtful for Garibaldi's character that so many of his team that he personally put together abandoned him. And I don't know if they're going to explore that as a dynamic going forward or not, but it would be interesting to see that. And I did like that they showed at least one of the people just turned in his gun and badge as opposed to taking the armband. So that was good. And I was wondering, where's Lou? You got to step up, Lou. Come on,
right?
Lou.
Yeah, I think that sign that was a kind of a representation of not everyone did that, right? That there at least are some. Yeah. And then they talk about that not everyone has agreed to take the pledge, to bend the knee, so to speak. Mm-hmm. We talked about this last time. The guy who's playing the head of Nightwatch, and by the way, I love the fact that he didn't try to be head. He's like, okay, Zach is
sure. He needs a scapegoat.
Yeah, second in command. You're going to take over. This is what was
Vaughn Armstrong, but he doesn't have a name in the show.
Yeah, Security Guard 1. I was like, no.
Yeah.
I think he is just the way he plays this. He's ecstatic. Right? Like, oh yeah, now then this is it. We're going to be able to get rid of all the trash. And we're going to
ring a bell.
Yeah, we're going to make Babylon 5 great again.
Yeah.
You know,
get rid of the deep state.
Where's his red hat?
Clear the swamp. Drain the swamp.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it, like real life, he's not really draining the swamp.
No.
And that is what happened in real life as well. Let's drain the swamp. Let's build a wall. And none of that crap happened. So I don't think any of that would have happened. I think it's a no-brainer that on Babylon 5, it simply would have been a way to control the population. Yeah. And I don't think martial law was going to be temporary. I think it was going to be permanent. And I do think that once they had that toehold with the martial law and the Nightwatch and all that, they were going to take advantage 100%, and they were going to just almost brainwash the population into following them going forward.
Yeah.
And that's so scary to me that it came so close.
Very George Orwellian.
1984. Yeah, definitely.
And you absolutely know that Clark still will, because we don't know what's going to go next, but Clark is never going to restore the Senate, or if he does, it's going to be his puppets. He is setting up to be a dictatorship.
Just like real life.
Yeah, and so I think, so while you're going, Karen, what did you think of Sheridan figuring out this wrinkle? Talk to me. And by the way, I had not watched Babylon 5 in multiple years, so it had been a while. So I knew what was coming in vague terms, but I didn't remember the specifics. So I'm right there with you, Lou. I thought this guy I took it as face value, and it was only afterwards I went, oh yeah, that's right. And then I love because everyone's got to cover their ass. And so this idea of sending a message to John without sending a message was pretty cool.
Yeah, and they mentioned throughout the episode, which was one of those lamppost things, that people were listening in. They were being monitored. And so that sets that baseline for the fact that the general also was being monitored. And I did appreciate that he fast forwards and rewinds, fast forward, and then plays the two clips next to each other. And he finally realized, this isn't the military. There is no chain of command. And that's what he was trying to tell me. And at first, I didn't really understand. And then I played it back a little bit, like I did what John did, essentially.
Yes.
And I went, oh, I get it now. I understand. He doesn't have to follow the government. He's a military person, and they're who gets there. They get their orders through them, not this arbitrary. Yeah. Although in real life that it would.
Yeah, I remember in a West Wing, technically Leo can't give an order. The President Bartlett can give an order, but Leo, as his chief of staff, can't.
Right.
Now, at times they follow him because they know he's speaking for the president, but there's actually a couple of West Wing episodes where they discuss that.
And yeah, it's like they can follow the order.
Yeah.
And they would if it was someone they respected. But
yeah,
in the letter of the law, if they go against it, they're kind of following the letter of the law, but not.
Yeah.
And again, that's part of why I like Sheridan, and I like Sinclair as well, where they understand the letter of the law. And once they find that loophole, they jump on it. And I appreciate how he was throughout this episode when he had to read that over the PA system, that they were in martial law, and you could see how upset he was by that. And then the jubilance he had when he realized, wow, I can use this to my advantage, and comes up with that plan to pull them all into the airlock and say to them, look, I know it's illegal, but guess what? It is legal. And so I'm going to use it right now. And I really liked that he twisted the law, but he remained lawful. And the Nightwatch people understood that, because that really hits home that if you have a good guy that's willing to put himself on the line for the right side of history, then, you have a huge asset.
Yeah. And I did love the statement, a senator can't give you an order, right? And like in the US, there's only 50 senators, 100 senators. So it's a pretty high powerful position in the government, but they aren't in the chain of command.
Right.
Lou, give me your thoughts. And also, if you include, I really liked the scene of the riot happening while he's giving that speech. I thought that was a really nice bit of drama.
Yeah, you stole my point.
Oh, okay, sorry.
I don't think. It is drama, but I thought it was a great visualization of the chaos that order was causing. It's often in a show when you get somebody reading some sort of edict or decree or whatever, it's like people are standing around looking at each other. So what does this mean? Whereas in this particular instance, they had the civilian population spurred on by the actions of some of the rebel generals that they were cheering what was happening. And I thought that was a really great visualization of the chaos that this order was bringing to everyone. And at the same time, I had to wonder, it says only half of the security team is on the Nightwatch, yet this 50% of the security teams fighting all these civilians. There's a lot of civilians, I think way more than there are security guards.
Yeah.
Wouldn't have Nightwatch have been pretty well beat up and put out of commission just from the civilians rioting? So I don't know if that's
they do have weapons.
So yeah, but they weren't using them. They were hand combat.
Yeah.
So I was a little surprised, and I wonder, did the regular security team just stand by and say, "Hey, this is not our show anymore. So it's up to you guys to." to quell this uprising. But strictly from a visualization point of view, I thought that was a brilliant stroke to have that going on while he was reading the martial law decree.
Yeah, that's a good point, where in other forms of media, when someone's reading something or is on the TV, they're just standing there staring at it or listening to it, sitting around the radio or whatever.
Yeah.
And they act, and I'm putting air quotes around that, they act out how they feel. They're, or they're happy that something has happened. And we did get that to a certain degree. But then we saw the outcome of that, with the people being on two sides, all standing there in the Zocalo. And to have him be reading that over the top of what was happening, I thought was brilliant, a brilliant stroke, where you see it happening as he's talking about it. It was just great acting, great directing, great producing, whatever it was that caused that, whatever confluence caused that. I think it was a stellar scene.
And then there was a nice exclamation point as Sheridan, after he's done reading it, he balls the piece of paper up and throws it into the garbage can, or throws it against the wall. We don't really know where it goes.
Yeah, whatever it was, he did.
But that was a nice end point for that whole sequence.
Definitely.
Yeah, and Franklin is the one who doesn't have a lot to do, but is the one that gives him that. And I do love when someone says something that, which is a little bit of trope. What? Say that again? But they didn't do that obvious, but made him start thinking. So,
it reminds me of that scene in The Good Place where Michael says, "Wait, say that again."
Yeah.
He turns that trope on its head. But
yes,
I do love that, when those light bulb moments. And the fact that it's Franklin really pissed me off, because why would Franklin know that? Why would he be walking around whatever?
Because his he was raised as a military brat. Because his dad's all...
There you go.
Yeah, so there. All right. I'm going to hold off talking about Jakar and the Narns as a separate topic. And then we're also going to talk about Londo Veer and the Major Barrett's character.
Lady Morella.
Lady Morella. Anything else on Nightwatch? I do love the fact that, and by the way, last week's episode, this week's episode, and next week's is actually a 3-parter in all but name only. He thought of that as this is a 3. He was telling one long story on these 3 episodes, but he didn't want to do part 1, part 2, and part 3. Because we are sitting there, someone complained, like, where are we at? Okay, we're left with, and that is their, I thought him and Susan, he says, we've gained us some time. That's all we can do. We're just gaining time. Anything else about this storyline that we need to visit?
Are they going to expel them, the people who were in Nightwatch and who are still loyal? Are they expelling them from Babylon 5?
I know what John said is, I would not think he would let someone flip back. Give you like, oh no, man, I was with you all the time.
Right. No,
you had a choice to make, and those who did not, bend the knee are still part of Sheridan's crew, and everyone else, he is going to, right now they're locked in their their quarters, and I assume he would, depending on what happens, will either get them to leave the stadium or the station or something. We have to wait and see.
Go back to Earth. And I would assume that they would want to go back to Earth.
Yes, absolutely.
Because they want to follow that regime. Okay, that was just a question I had.
Oh, good question. All right, so they let Jakar out early. We do get to hear Jakar singing.
Yeah.
And this is very much a storyline. I think very Nelson Mandela and other people that in prison, they have an awareness and that Jakar has been a man of war and has now become, I think, a person of peace and has gone through I think he is in the middle of a wonderful journey. And so
based on false,
huh?
Based on false premise.
Yes. Good point. I think some atheists would say all of religion is based on false points.
Well, I was thinking more of cautious intervention.
Yeah, no, exactly. I agree.
Yeah.
So he reaches out to the Narns, the people that are there, saying, I'm asking something from you. And we find out, and I love that Sheridan says, always bury a little bit of truth in a lie. And we get now that the Narns are now part of security at the station. We get another episode. We get Talon, which I love that character. So let's.
And that was the guy who was on the ship with Sheridan, right?
Yes, okay. And he's the one that came. But remember that had a great scene where I have a sword, you have your words, and yeah. And then at the end, Jakar says, "I want in. I know you're planning something," and they didn't deny it. They go, "Okay, I'll get back to you." And he says, "Hurry, because I want to do." Lou, what do you think of Jakar and the Narn storyline?
I'm definitely glad to see his character getting a real piece of storyline to chew on, which is great. I'm a little unclear as to we know based on that sequence with Kosh what his purpose is, but having that experience is one thing. Being able to articulate that to his fellow Narn and have it make sense without sounding like a religious fanatic or something like that is something the show looks like it's going to just avoid doing altogether, because they're not going into detail what the speech was that Jakar gave to his fellow Narn when he said he had to ask a great favor of them, but we never found out how he convinced them to do it. And I don't know if he's sharing that vision that he has with everyone, or he might just be sharing that with Talon, because I think if he publicly made a public statement as to what he's doing, I don't think everybody would be on board with that. So that whole part of the story for his journey is nebulous at the moment for me, or maybe I'm just dwelling on it too much, or maybe I just don't understand exactly how he's going to convince people to follow him, especially in a time of war when your focus is not on higher moral ground type issues, when you're more focused on just surviving or revenge or whatever, the more baser emotions. So how he's pulling this off, I think he's probably just using his previous reputation to get things done right now, but somewhere along the way he's going to have to lay his cards on the table as to why he's doing what he's doing. And I don't know if that's ever going to be done clearly or not, or if they're just skimming over it like they did in this episode. And so I'll be very curious to see how that goes forward. But I do love the dynamic of having all those Narn as part of security force. It's pretty funny in a wry, ironic kind of way, which I really like that. And I hope we get to see some interplay between Londo and Jakar about that, or just Londo in general walking around the ship and bumping into these 9 security guards. That should be quite a bit of fun to see. And also, I'm not clear on how Jakar knew that his destiny lay with the humans. From our perspective, we're going to say, of course, because we're the most important race out of all the people on Babylon 5. We've built the station and we've pulled everybody together. But what is Lando's or Jakar's insight as to why their fate lies with, or his mission, his goal, or his journey, or whatever he's on, lies with the aligning with the humans? I guess you could argue that they've been the only ones that have really helped the Narn during the war, taking in refugees and helping them with supplies and helping them with weapons and so forth. So on that level, I guess it makes sense, but I'm just trying to tie it into his religious conversion as to why he thinks it's the humans. So that's a little unclear to me as well, but I'm willing to wait to see how that plays out. And it'll be interesting to see, and I assume that, and I don't think it'll be a surprise to any of us, that the council does accept him. We know Garibaldi's in Jakar's corner for sure, and I think Sheridan is sympathetic to it. I'm not sure about Delin, and I assume Delin would be too, because Franklin. I don't think any of them like what has happened to the Narn people because of the Centauri incursions into their territory. Yeah, I'm very curious to see how that all plays out, and I'm curious to see how Jakar, who's on a more higher moral ground journey, as opposed to the rest of the council who's preparing for war. Again, you're going to have this frisson between him and the rest of the council, and it's a nice turn of the tables that a character that was so base in his actions and reactions in the beginning of the series has now become like a prophet or a disciple, I guess you could say. So that's an interesting turn. So yeah, I'm totally into that whole storyline. I really can't wait to see where it goes, and the inevitable confrontation between him and Londo as well.
Yeah, and I think I'm just guessing here because I've never thought about that. I assume because the humans are fighting the Shadow War, and based on the book of Jaquan, that this ancient evil he was aware of. So maybe that is. And I also think while he's a man of peace, I think he may be someone who is willing to fight for the right cause. So we'll wait and see. Yeah, really good stuff. Karen.
Yeah, I got the impression, and Lou, you made an excellent point about his motivation and how he rouses the troops, as it were, because I didn't even think about that. But thinking about it just now, I'm guessing that the whole point of that episode where Talon comes on board with the new representative, the Centauri approved representative, that is reinforcing our opinion that the other Narns are in Jakar's corner. That's my thought on it. That was so close to this episode. It's telegraphing the fact that he can get all these Narns on board with his plan. And we know they are not as enlightened as he is right now. He's come to this conclusion when he was in jail and through reading the book of Jaquan, and he's very zen about things, and I don't think the other Narns are. And I think they're ready. They're ready to be put in place as someone with some authority on Babylon 5. And I think all of that stuff put together is how they decided. Again, it's just me reading into it. it's not known to me whether that's the case or not, but I would like to think that they are simply loyal to Jakar and they're willing to fight in his corner. And then they realize that on Babylon 5, if they're with the humans and the humans are fighting against their enemy, then that's the corner they want to be in. I don't know if I'm making sense, but
yeah, no, I get you, and I that's the way the storyline is playing out from this point. My concern is just that his true motivation is not what he's presenting to the people. That's all.
Right, I agree. And I would hope that they resolve that. I don't know that they're going to, because it's a TV show that people didn't watch like we're watching. So resolving that is not quite as important as it would be if it was streaming, say.
Yeah.
Because we see all of them bunched together. And that's true of almost every show that was broadcast before streaming and wasn't meant to be watched over and over again or binged or whatever. That there were a lot of holes in the story that you don't notice because they're just not in your head. You don't watch them like we're watching them.
And it's just also, that's not the part of the story that JMS wants to focus on. He probably wants to focus on the conflict. And these are issues or items that he'll say, I'll leave it up to the viewers to interpret how that's playing out as well, which is fine.
Sure.
I'm just saying for myself, I'd like to see that addressed, but I just don't know if it will be, or that's all.
Right.
Good.
Yeah, and there's a lot of things that I would love to see addressed in this show. I feel like they probably won't be, just because they're things that he could say, this happened off screen.
Exactly. Yeah. There's a lot of macro stuff that has to happen.
And I do think overall, I'm not talking these specific storylines, he does a good job, better than most, of trying to lock down loose threads because of him telling his mind, this is a 5-year arc and it is a 5-year history of Babylon 5. It is what happens during these 5 years. All right, let's go to Lady Morella. Yeah, thank you. A little background. At this time, there was a lot of Babylon 5 versus Star Trek noise. Because very different, Babylon 5 believes that there was good and bad in us 100 years ago. There will be good and bad with us 100 years from now. Star Trek, on the other hand, says that we have become our best persons. And so there's a little bit of difference. There also is the unfair rumor that Babylon 5 was a ripoff of Deep Space Nine, even though it was actually, and not directly a ripoff, but it was the other way around. J. Michael Straczynski had pitched a lot of executives at Paramount Babylon 5, and then later they passed on it. Then years later, Deep Space Nine came. He absolutely believes the creators of Deep Space Nine were not ripping them off whatsoever. He thinks that the executives had this thing and may have passed on information, but not anything at all. He has always cited the original Star Trek series as one of the best, one of his influences, along with Twilight Zone. And so he had heard that Majel Barrett was at conventions praising Babylon 5. And when fans were booing him, she said, no, this is one of the best written series out there. You should give it a try. So he found out they were both going to be at a convention at the same time. They had a meal, and he said, would you want to guest star? I've already written a script, and this is the part I would want you to play. And she said, I would love it. And so that's how that came to happen. You guys have already talked about that she is the voice of the computer. She is the Gene Roddenberry's widow. And in a lot of ways has carried on his legacy. There is a specific here, I'll find the quote.
Passed on too.
Yeah, she has.
Yeah.
She says, greatness is never appreciated in youth, called pride in middle age, dismissed in old age, reconsidered in death. Because we cannot tolerate greatness in our midst, we do all we can to destroy it. JMS said that, yes, there was a little bit of Gene Roddenberry thoughts when he was writing that. So I think she had some great lines. I thought she really handled herself well. Karen, let's start with you. Let's talk about the Veer, Londo. Both are going to be emperors, and this whole storyline.
Yeah. This was after Gene had passed away.
Yes.
And I love that she is so involved in the kind of things that he would have liked, even up until she died, which I really think that's cool that they had similar interests, and that I feel like she's carrying on for him, even on Babylon 5. It's a very Star Trekian character. It's weird that she's talking in third person. That's one of my pet peeves, is people talking in third person, but I get why she does it here, that she's also absorbed her husband who has died. And it's confirmed now that they have similar telepaths to our telepaths, that she touches Londo and sees visions of him. And that's one thing that we had wondered about, is what races also have this type of telepath. And I'm assuming that we get her for flavor in this episode, but her main purpose was to give Londo this vision in this episode, and also to give Veer his vision. I think it's cool that, and I had no idea this was coming, that Veer was also going to be emperor. So this was a bit of a, not a shock, but you know what I'm saying. It's not that huge of a storyline right now, but it was an interesting note that she says, she didn't have to give all that away, but she says, you will also be emperor. And I think some of that is because she sees how Londo treats him and wants to give him this boost, and also put some fear in Londo to say one of you will die and the other one will become emperor. She doesn't say which one. And she's pretty nebulous about it, for it being a specific prediction. She's nebulous as well. And then to follow it up with that conversation between Londo and Veer when they're like sitting on whatever, the couch, on two ends of the couch, and he's like, I've made you dinner. I'm not really hungry. And he says, do you not trust me? And they're showing that now Londo is thinking about, is Veer going to have it out for me now? And that it's a really interesting dynamic where Londo is not quite sure of where Veer sits. He sees that Veer is becoming more confident because he's gone to Minbari. He's arguing with Londo about the kind of wording he's going to put in these missives. And I think that Londo is worried, and Veer has a better standing right now. He's very confident. He realizes he has somewhere to go, and I think it's cool. I love the dynamic of them becoming less of a master and student, more of a similar thing, because Londo's there as an emissary, and then Veer is now the same on the Minbari world, right? He is now an emissary as well there. So they essentially have the same job now, just in different places. And it's interesting to see, are they going to butt heads? And I'm assuming they will, because we know where Veer stands in all this.
Yeah, that was an interesting storyline in several aspects. I think Veer's had more appearances ever since he was supposed to go to Minbari than before. So I don't know if the show that he was gone to star in had already run its course that quickly, or like how was he handling shooting these two series at the same time? I don't know, but that was interesting to see him back again. And the conversations that they had about the reports that Veer had prepared and Londo was reworking are so much on point with, again, what's going on in the real world, fact-based arguments based on facts versus arguments based on fears. And Veer is on the fact side and Londo's on the fear side. And you can see how the fear-based stuff has just got more oomph to it. It's more impactful. It's more spicy. Whereas regardless of how it's perverting the factual data, it's got enough, again, of, like Karen just said earlier, it's got enough of the truth into it that it's got that ring of authenticity to it, but it's usually just a springboard to go into more fanciful things that are totally false. And I thought that was again a nice mirror of what's going on today with a lot of this, not just social media, but just media in general, depending on where the source is coming from. So that was quite interesting. The bits with Morella giving the future proselyte innovations about what was going to happen to not just Londo but to Veer were also interesting. And on the one hand, I was thinking, if they're going to both be emperor, Londo's older than Veer, so he could maybe just live out a normal life and pass away, and then Veer would take over. There's nothing sinister about that, but the fact that Londo doesn't live in that kind of a world, so everything's a conspiracy to him. And I think Veer just got the vibes off of Londo because of that, and knowing what Londo's done, it's understandable that he doesn't trust Londo either. But I do have to wonder about that Veer prophecy. When Lady Morella said that, she had a smile or a smirk when she said that, and I don't know if she's smirking because she's telling Londo something that she was not specifically there for, or is she just doing that to goad or torment Londo a bit as well? I'm not sure, but I thought there was an interesting beat when she made that prophecy statement about Veer, and I thought that was a nice touch to add that ambiguity to that moment. So I really liked that, how that played out. And of course, she mentioned that Londo had 3 chances to change his path, and I believe he's used 2 of them already. And the third one is going to be the most difficult one for him.
No, I have that written down. Londo has already passed up 2 chances to avoid the destiny he fears awaits him. There will be 3 more. He must save the eye that does not see. He must not kill the one who is already dead. And failing those at the last, he must surrender himself to his greatest fear, knowing that it will destroy him. So he has had 5 chances to miss.
5, wow.
And he's already missed 3. She talks about there is no way him not to be emperor. And
so no matter what path he
takes, he will be emperor.
Okay.
And then, so yes, and so obviously there's a lot of speculation if you go to Lurker's Guide, or what were the 2 choices that he's already had. A common is Morden.
Sure.
When
not ever getting into bed with Morden.
Yeah, sure. Was one of them. The other could have been
the assault on our homeworld.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I do think it is played very funny with both of them on that couch, and the hand gestures. I thought you were leaving.
Yeah.
Oh, and then like
takeout.
No,
the ship's
tomorrow.
Yeah.
I'm sure as the actors, Stephen Furst and Peter Jurassic loved that, just playing that comedy. And also because Veer is subservient to Londo, and the idea of Londo not trusting him, and you're right, he lives in the world of conspiracies, because I agree with you. I'm like, no, that makes Veer is much younger than Londo, so that but I do love the way Stephen Furst oh, you're not kidding? I thought this was just a joke.
Yeah.
It was really interesting.
And I'm assuming when she touched Londo, she had that vision about Londo.
Yeah.
And part of what I'm assuming is that when Veer gets hurt, she tends to him, and that's when she gets the vision about Veer.
Right.
I think so.
When she
And I do love that Veer is just soaking it in, that she's taking care of him, and yes, go get another, like he just loves this thing.
Yeah. And then the other thing I wanted to mention for that whole sequence was, this seems to be the setting up of Londo's redemption, although I put that in quotes because I don't think he can be redeemed, but it might be his way of paying penance at the very least, or admitting his guilt and truly feeling sorry for what he's done. But I don't believe that he can be redeemed, or I don't think he can get redemption. Redemption is, I think, has become a fairly commonly thrown around phrase, because one of the things that irks me of the and there's many things that irk me about the Star Wars prequels, is how people or even the originals, is how people say that Darth Vader redeems himself when he throws the Emperor down the shaft. That's not redemption. Okay, he still did all those things. He still killed all those people. Yeah. He did all those terrible things. That's an act of selflessness, but that doesn't redeem a person. You can't tip the scales like that of morality. If you've done something immoral, that stays there, and you can, at the very best you can hope for in that kind of a situation, is that you come to the realization that what you did was wrong, and that you are truly sorry for it, and that's the best you can do. But you're not going to get redeemed. And I suspect, based on the nature of the series, that JMS likes to flip around our loyalties and feelings for characters. But that's not going to fly with me. Londo cannot be redeemed. This might be setting up what people would call his redemption storyline, but that is not something that I'm going to accept in any shape, manner, or form.
Okay. So we're almost halfway through the third season, which will give you, we're almost halfway through the series.
Wow.
When you think about it that way, because it's 5 things,
Yep.
We're at episode 9. We've got 12 left, so not quite halfway through, or 13 episodes left, because there's 21, 22 episodes of the season. Any other thoughts about this one before we give our ratings?
Did we hit everything?
Okay,
no,
good.
I'm just hoping General Haig makes it out.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
That he is now leading the resistance.
Yeah.
And that's good to see. Is that going to be more of a background thing, or is that going to be resolved? That's a good point.
Yeah, it's gonna, I think, a good questions to have.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Where's Marcus?
Yes, absolutely. Always love seeing Marcus.
Yes, we do.
Mm-hmm. Yes. All right, Karen, rating.
I'm going to give this 9 more towels.
Okay. Lou?
I thought you were saying a name at first. Mortel? I don't know who's that.
Oh, no, more towels. Yes, bring me another towel.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm going to give this 9 Enterprise computer voices.
Perfect. Yeah, I'm going to give this a 9 out of 10 Narn security forces. Yeah, this was a good one, and I'm glad you guys enjoyed it. Just a lot of fun. All right, we do have some feedback. Some of it long, but
I'll try to edit.
Yeah, but Karen, you want to start us out? Do you want me to read one? You got them?
I got him.
Okay, good.
So we have one from Nathan first, and he says, "Hey guys, this is one of the episodes that made a notable number of people talk about Babylon 5 with derision and contempt, because nothing like this could happen in an enlightened Western country, which long since surpassed fascist overthrows of the governments and coups in general, like coups had anything to do with fascism. Reviews talked about faulty comparisons with 30s Germany and how Babylon 5 is not a good sci-fi because it doesn't look into the future, which is probably why some people on social media are still looking forward to authoritarian dictatorships to be overthrown by a crew of one ship or by a protest or something. It makes modern reactions to the show much more satisfying. Mine was fear and hope. Besides the fall of Narn last season, I haven't experienced anything like that before watching B5. So Sheridan's attempts to deal with the encroaching police state and await for a good end of the coup were very endearing. I also knew nothing about chain of command, so the whole gambit with using the letter of the law, which was much more surprising and more satisfying than usual twists or previous instances of similar. Londo's storyline didn't cause the same strong contradictory feelings. You want to love the guy despite what he has done, so his search for salvation is heartwarming, even though he was a hypocrite when talking about Turhan with any kind of positivity. With regards, Nathan.
And yeah, thank you for that, Nathan. I do think, Lou, you could have salvation but not redemption, perhaps. I like his word of salvation, right? So that is going to be curious to see on that. Yeah, and as we talked about, I do think it's funny that the more things change, the more they stay the same, and what you would have thought was outlandish actually was a little too close to home. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, now let's go with Texas Anlashak, who has a fairly funny feedback. I'm just looking through it right now. His first line is, "All hail Emperor Cato." We'll get to that, but in the meantime, we have a situation on Earth, a situation that bears a striking resemblance to certain events in real-world history, when a president attempted to unlawfully keep hold of power through extreme means. I am, of course, referring to October 3rd, 1993, the day Boris Yeltsin ordered the Russian military to open fire on the Russian parliamentary building where the representatives had barricaded themselves after he had ordered that body dissolved. What did you think I was going to say? And then he says, Earth force is divided between those who are following the president and those who are protesting and rebelling against his illegal actions. Among those is General Haig, but with him now wanted by EarthGov, he's now B5's biggest liability. And to make matters worse, orders come in that Nightwatch is to be given sole responsibility of security. But the order is phrased in such a way as to point out that this is not a lawful order, which gives Sheridan the room he needs to maneuver. And now it comes the moment of no return. He lures Nightwatch into an area where they can be contained and locks them in, declaring that they are all in violation of the chain of command. Now, technically, he's correct, but this shows that he is not on Clark's side. If orders from the president ever do come, the first thing he'll do is reinstate Nightwatch, and the first order he gives them will be to round up the command crew for treason. And a side note from me, Karen, that's why I asked if he was going to expel them from Babylon 5, because if the orders do come down, they could be back, and now they can't be if he expels them. So that's just why I had my question. And back to the feedback. And as the episode ends, that seems to be right where we're headed. Then he says a bit about Londo and all that. And he is referring to maybe some stuff in the future, which I won't get into. A couple of details. I really like the image of Sheridan getting his wake-up call while he's just sitting there like he was about to get ready for bed, but then just sat there thinking about it all night. And the scene in the transport tube with Lady Morella and Talon was great. Neither of them make a fuss about it, but she looks decidedly uncomfortable, and he just gets this little smirk like he's enjoying every second of this. Anyway, there's no going back now. There's only the way forward wherever it leads. Just remember, never badmouth the customs agents. This is the Texas Anashak signing off in Valen's name.
Thank you, Texas. We did edit your wonderful email. It was absolutely great just for time. So
I skimmed it.
Yes.
And I'm sure I'll go back and read it in a few minutes, but we have to.
Yeah.
And then we have one from David. And he says, beyond a certain point, there is no return. This point has to be reached, by Franz Kafka. Quite a few things happening back on B5. I'm not going to recap the whole episode, just a few thoughts. That's going to be too long anyway. Sheridan's speech to the CNC crew was almost perfect. Keep calm. Assure everyone that nothing affects B5 yet, but honestly answers Corwin's question. Sometimes the commander doesn't have the answers himself. Lady Morella, y'all haven't discussed it that I'm aware of, but when this first aired, there was an intense rivalry between the fans of B5 and DS9. Things were very heated when JMS met Major Roddenberry, aka the First Lady of Star Trek, at a convention. They wound up eating dinner together. Major told him how much she enjoyed B5. The next day, during a Star Trek discussion panel, B5 was mentioned, followed by a chorus of boos. Major Roddenberry ripped the crowd a new one, saying they should support B5. It was a well-written, quality show. JMS decided to write a part for her after that. Last week, Lou commented on Vaughn Armstrong. Yes, you probably have seen him in several things. He did a few roles for the various Star Trek productions, most notably as Admiral Forrest in Enterprise. Here he gives a good performance. He's such a heavy, surprised he can even move. Things like the hint of a sneer when he tells Zach to bring extra ammo. all the scenes with the large amount of extras. B5 saved money on their budget by not hiring many extras. They would dress up members of the crew, family members of the crew, etc., and set them up on set. For the scenes with all Nightwatch members, my understanding is they planned those scenes to be shot before lunch on quote unquote barbecue day, the day everyone was on set, so they had enough people available for that scene. Garibaldi learned a hard lesson about personal loyalty in this episode, or else the two guys shown either not happy with his marriage and the other not happy with his job. By the way, this was an example of be careful what you ask for. You got Jakar singing. Jakar's vision in Dust is starting to really take effect. He hasn't quite figured it out, but he's well on his way to becoming a valuable ally. Solando has 3 chances to redeem himself. Good luck guessing what they are. He can't avoid becoming the Emperor, and neither can Veer. One thing, after the last 2 episodes, I suggest Veer either get a football helmet or spend more time on Minbar. Sheridan's showdown with the Nightwatch was well done. They even managed to rescue Zach. But at best, they've only bought a few days. Wonder what Clark and the Nightwatch will do next. Try and take it easy on next week's episode. They had a ton of problems behind the scenes. They barely got it out at all.
Oh, yeah, very nice.
Thanks, David.
Wonderful. If you want to be like these wonderful people, text us on the shock, David and Nathan. Send an email to jklb5podcast@gmail.com. Lou, anything on our YouTube channel that you want to mention?
Not too much. Thanks to the people that did comment. I got this episode out late, so the comments haven't really piled up too much yet. But
yeah,
there was, I think David, he on YouTube, he comes up as D.D. Lond. He's mentioned that there was a couple of interesting semi-serious points. The breakfast scene, he talks about the fact that eggs don't go bad that quickly when you have unlimited refrigeration on a ship. He also mentions that Ivanova is a somewhat observant Jew. Maybe they decided pork is kosher. So that's interesting. And then he makes some interesting speculation about the 2 shadow ships that were shown that were dug up and then they disappeared. That happened 6 to 7 years ago, and then 5 years ago, Anne Sheridan joins the Icarus to explore a previously unknown dead civilization out on the rim that later is revealed to be Zadum. So is that coincidence, or did someone have a way to track that? So that's an interesting speculation. So there you go.
Very
nice. Good. All right, Lou, if someone wants to reach you, how can they?
You can find this podcast and various others at YouTube, Lou's Reviews, where you can find also the JKL Media podcast, where we're currently working through 12 Monkeys, the TV series, and as well there's interviews with writers and the Stephen King podcast. On Twitter, you can find me at Lou W. Sitzma.
All right, Karen?
I am at Oliveria on the various social medias, and my blog is alliesstuff.com.
And you can find me at Jesse Jackson DFW on Twitter. We would love to hear what you're thinking of and about the show. Please share it with a friend. Go to iTunes, rate and review us. We would love to get a new review. All right, we've got the next week, Severed Dreams, which I do not think is Annie Lennox, but we will see. Maybe Sweet Dreams, right? Or 8 of these.
Yep.
So we'll go from there. For now, I really appreciate spending time with you, Lou, and with you, Karen. This has been a lot of fun, and I look forward to hanging out next week.
Absolutely. Same here.
All right, everyone, be kind, be safe, and we will talk to you soon. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Yay. Good.
And see.
Good.